You promised yourself, you swore you wouldn't yell again, but then the chaos hits. And before you know it, there you are, wagging your finger and yelling, losing your and then the mom guilt hits. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I think we've all been there, okay? And if you don't yell at your kids, tell us how down in the comments, okay? So, hey, if you don't know me, I'm Dr. Megan Monday. I'm a trauma therapist turned pleasure psychologist, and I work with anxious moms on mindset and pleasure to better their mental health and to make happy families and, I don't know, a better world. So, if you have been caught in the cycle of yelling at your kids, followed by shame spiral, or you're trying to do something and then you hear your partner yelling at your kids and wonder, how do I intervene so that I don't mess up my kids and they have to be in therapy for the rest of their lives? This is the video for you. Okay, so it's super easy to get stuck in this cycle and to feel awful about it. Actually, this particular video topic came from a content calendar meeting with my team where I said, what's a problem you're dealing with right now? My video editor has, correct me if I'm wrong, 7-year-old and a 1-year-old. And we were on a meeting. And of course, her partner, like many of us do, was yelling at the kids. It is just so relatable. We've all been there. And I think it's hard enough as a mom not to lose your. But then what do you do if your partner is yelling at your kids when you don't want them to? Okay. So not only is it a family issue, it's a couples issue, and it's an individual therapy issue. Okay. And let me just tell you, I've worked with so many moms and dads who get caught in the cycle of feeling like their kids only respond when they yell. And then it's a catch-22 because you're in this cycle and you know it's not effective, and yet it's a little bit effective, but like effective potentially in a damaging way. So yeah, let's get us all out of the fight cycle. We know flight or fight, right? But often in families, it comes out as the fight cycle. So here's what we're going to talk about today. These are key takeaways for moms and dads. Yelling isn't about just kids' behavior, it's about our behavior. It's about our nervous system regulation, which you know is one of my favorite topics to talk about in this channel. So tell me your tips down below for nervous system regulation. We can never get enough of those. But if you're like me, like most parents and families out there, it's really tough to stay regulated around kids. One, because I think they can just annoy the shit out of you. Easily done. One of their favorite activities, in fact. And parenting is a 24/7 job. I know my child didn't sleep for 5 years, and that made me crazy. And I'm just going to own it. So it's really easy to get into that cycle of where your nervous system is dysregulated. And then guess what? Your kids are co-regulating with your nervous system. So if your nervous system is whack, theirs is probably too. Now, hopefully with the couples dynamic, the mom and dad have similar nervous regulation issues. But I would just say in general, I tend to see, surprisingly, moms more regulated. Men tend to lead with anger because our society socializes them to think that that's the only acceptable emotion. So are we surprised when they yell at our kids? Not exactly, because we're actually encouraging them that that's part of their tough guy persona. So we need to rewrite this gender role, starting with our own nervous system regulation and hopefully that of the moms and the dads. So, super important. I think nervous system regulation has become a buzzword in certain circles. And I'm writing a book about it. And to be real, y'all, I had to Google it and say, what is regulation? And it actually means to govern. I was thinking of it as regular, a regularly scheduled self-soothe break could be a nervous system regulation technique, or regulated breathing is a great one, or a shower in the morning to wake up out of the mom frazzle dazzle. So it's one of those things that it's a buzzword, but do we actually know what it means? Well, it means basically regular self-care so that you're not batshit crazy. Okay, so that's what this channel is all about. It's about taming the anxious mind and getting in regular self soothe breaks so we can be amazing moms and entrepreneurs. And this is not maybe politically correct, but I often tell my clients, you have to be the bigger woman here. Okay, so particularly if you're parenting with a man who's the dad or a man who's a stepdad, you have to be the bigger woman and you have to lead by example. And so I wish I wasn't that way, but I do find that women are very powerful wisdom keepers. And because of the gender role socialization of men, they're going to sort of yell first, ask questions later, depending on your man. I don't mean to, I'm generalizing a lot here, but obviously, if this doesn't apply to you, then applause. Okay. I want to bust some myths here real quick. The first one is about our kids' nervous system regulation. It does come from us. They model what they see and mirror. That's why if you say bad words, you might see your toddler say a bad word, right? They repeat and do what they hear. Now, here's another sort of clincher, which is that as kids get older, they don't just model what we do to them. For example, we can love them and support them and be the best moms for them. But then if we're neglecting us, as they get older, they start to mirror what they see us doing with ourselves. Okay. So, in case any of y'all are trying to raise the best kids by pouring it all on them, not the best strategy. Actually, a better strategy might be to throw some of that love and compassion and self soothing your way so that you can be regulated enough to model regulation. So that's super important. And then obviously emotional regulation is super important in kids, right? Because we're going to send them off to school. They're going to have to be regulated and with the stresses of school, with relationships, with all of the modern things. Technology can really be a huge red flag for emotional regulation because they're used to constant stimulation and instant satisfaction. Okay, so delay of gratification and regulation is probably one of the biggest challenges these days. Am I right, teachers? Like, tell me. I think I'm going to say that that's probably a unanimous. Okay, so I want to bust some myths here. Nonviolent communication isn't about being soft. I can hear my husband talking in my ear here. Well, she's disrespectful. She needs to learn respect. Something like that. That's probably not a good impression of him. Don't get offended if you're watching. But just to say, I think men in particular are really sensitive to disrespect. And then it's sort of like when kids are little and you say, don't hit, and then you spank them. Like that doesn't make sense, right? You're telling them not to disrespect someone by hitting, but then you're hitting. I think I'm not advocating spanking or not spanking. The research suggests that that kind of punishment is not very helpful. I do think sometimes with a certain kind of strong-willed toddler moment, there some correction can be helpful. But generally, it's sort of a mixed message of like they're doing bad behavior and then you're doing bad behavior to correct the bad behavior. Hmm. Who came up with that? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah. What's the history of spanking? That makes me kind of want to Google that. Probably not a good history, y'all. Okay, we don't want to take these behaviors forward. But again, kids do need consequences. We don't need to be soft and friends with our kids and letting them be the authority and making all the decisions because then we're not really parenting, right? So it's not about being super soft or we're getting taken advantage of. What it is about is being effective. Okay, we have to do what's effective. And that's where I think people can get really trapped with yelling because yelling sometimes can be effective, okay? Because it kind of shatters the moment in an intense way and it sort of demands attention. But I think most parents know that our kids get, and partners sometimes get really good at tuning us out to the point where it's not very effective. Okay. And there can be a really destructive cycle where children expect to be yelled at and or negative punishment. And then the only control they have is when it's going to happen. And so they can push the bad behavior to just kind of get the punishment over with. We sort of see this with abandonment issues in adults where they think they're going to get abandoned and the only control they have is when. And so they push people away. And then guess what happens? they get abandoned. Okay. So we don't want this sort of ineffective cycle playing out, although it's super common. And so we want to do what's effective to correct behavior. Okay. Now, one of the great things is, and this goes to the mom guilt anxiety piece, is that the repair is just as important as regulation. Quick little story time. When I was a therapist in training, a little 21-year-old doing therapy, one of my supervisors said to me, it's not about catching the thing the first time, because if it's an issue and you didn't get to explore it, it's going to come right back around, probably the next session. Same thing, if you make a mistake, it's not necessarily about the mistake, it's about the repair. And so I love this since I work with people for a living and I'm having all kinds of complicated conversations. I take the pressure off, whether it's a client, my partner, my kid. If I make a mistake, I just own it and say, hey, I didn't mean to invalidate you, or I didn't mean to lose my temper. How can I make that up to you? Or, hey, I'm not mad at you, I'm just tired. Some of these things can be really helpful. And also, again, just modeling the regulation. Some really quick tips for regulation are moment to pause. I call this AKA the adult timeout. When your kids get old enough to where you can't really time them out anymore, what I prefer, and this even works with the later toddler years, if they're in a safe place, is to do the mommy timeout or the daddy timeout, which is remove yourself from the situation and go regulate. Breathe, go outside, go out for a pack of smokes, whatever your thing is, and then come back, reset, and regulate it. Okay. So apologizing and reconnecting after yelling teaches resilience. So I think it's super important that, as parents, we're going to have those meltdown moments. We want to reduce the frequency as much as possible, but in my mind, they are somewhat inevitable. And so it's not necessarily about losing your shit as much as finding it afterwards and then making the repair and helping your kid to regulate after being yelled at. I think we've all had those mornings trying to get out of the house where it's like you can't find the folder and the permission slip is due and it's raining and the traffic's crazy and then you forgot your phone, right? Maybe all of that in one day. That's like my typical morning. And so it's really easy to get dysregulated, right? And so it's funny. A lot of times, because I worked at a holistic treatment center, and one of my favorite regulation tips is square breathing. It's breathing in, holding, exhaling, holding, breathing in, creates a square, right? So anyway, I would get frustrated and I would go, and my daughter would say, "Are you mad at me?" And I would say, "No, I'm just trying to regulate and breathe. I'm trying to avoid getting mad." Okay. So she thought I was taking a passive aggressive breath, which maybe I was, but more with the intention of regulation. Okay. So again, that's just where we clarify communication. And it's really helpful to help your kids understand the nuances of what's happening in the moment. So are you ready for some nonviolent communication tips? Highly recommend this book, Nonviolent Communication. Does my happy little hippie heart proud to speak towards nonviolence. That's a value that I find very important. And again, it's rare in these days and in this world. And so I think it's about how can we just do more of this? Okay. It's not an all or nothing sort of thing. Whenever we're on the extremes, that can be really detrimental to mental health. So it's not that I'm never going to yell or never going to lose my shit. It's just anytime I do, I'm going to do the repair. I'm going to regulate myself and I'm going to cope ahead so that hopefully it won't happen again in the future. So, nonviolent communication tip 1, connect and redirect. Okay, this works so good, and yet most people do not do this. The typical example that I give is like when a kid is falling and skins their knee and they look to the parent to see if they're okay. And usually the parent is super well intentioned, but they go, "You're okay. You're okay." And I remember doing that to my child one time and she goes, "I'm not okay." And then I was like, "Oh, okay. She's really hurting. Okay. Okay. Let's breathe. Okay. Let's get you a Band-Aid. Let's get you taken care of, some ice, whatever." But when your kid corrects you, listen to that. I think sometimes parents are challenged by that, but I am a firm believer that sometimes our kids are much wiser than we are, and they are definitely here to teach us things. And so we should listen to that. So in this particular case, instead of just being like, you're okay, what I want to say is you're hurting right now. And in our society, that feels kind of rude. This is something we talked about in the treatment center all the time with validation. Instead of validating, people want to do, bless your heart, you're fine, God's got this, right? And if you're really hurting, that can come off extremely invalidating. Well, same thing for kids, right? And so when they're hurting, you could say, oh, you're really hurt. Here, let's go take care of you. And so what you're doing is you're labeling the child's emotion with empathy before correcting the behavior. Okay. So, like, you're frustrated right now, and it's probably time to go have a snack, and you'll feel better after the snack. That's what I teach my clients as far as validation. You think about what the other person's feeling, their objections, and instead of saying, but, you add in the request or the boundary afterwards. So I'll give you one that I use on my husband a lot. I know you're super swamped. Usually we say, but, and the trash needs to be taken out. Or if I have a honey-do list, I'll be like, I know you don't want to do this. And, I think this is our next project. Okay, so I'm already validating the objection or what they're feeling. I'm de-escalating that so that they feel heard. They're less defensive. And then they're more able to hear my request or my boundary. Works great with kids too. But the whole thing is we try to redirect. If they fall down and you're like, you shouldn't have been running. Okay, that's invalidating. Okay, try not to do it. It's a natural sort of control thing that we like to do, not super effective. So instead, what you want to say is, oh, okay, you hurt yourself. If they're crying and stuff, just wait till they're done crying. And that's why it's important to slow down, not run. It's better to say what you want them to do versus what you don't want them to do. And that's for anything. Okay. These are my little validation hacks. I teach people this formula all the time. And even when they know the formula, it still works. Wow, it's one of the best things I got out of working at that treatment program. The second tip is name it to tame it. So this helps kids process emotions by naming what's happening. Okay. In DBT, we used to call this observe and describe. And this is what check-in was about. When we would check in about the week, what we're asking them to do is observe their feelings, observe what happened in the week, and then put words on it. Well, the same thing is super helpful for kids. So could be something like, time to plug in the computer. Mom moment of zen, totally unplug the camera to plug in the computer. Oh, love a mom mindful moment, opportunity to get mindful when we mess something up. And I think that's what all of this is really truly about, which is to just make the best of what you got. Okay. So again, we want to name it to tame it. So we want to help kids process their emotions by naming what's happening. So you're feeling really mad because that tower fell, or you're feeling mad because dad yelled at you, or you're feeling sad because your friend couldn't come over. Whatever it is, okay? So that helps kids learn to identify their emotions, which just universally people suck at, okay? I can tell you as a therapist that whenever I ask people, like, how are you feeling? It's a therapy cliche, and not to say it too much, but when I ask people, how does that make you feel? They're like, eye roll. People don't like that. Why? Because people mostly know mad, sad, glad, angry, afraid. And so those are good ones to start with. But if you want to get extra, you can buy one of those emotional wheels with all the emotions. And there's even some fun little like therapy things like pillows and posters and stuff you can buy. Just look on Etsy or Temu or wherever you go there. The number 3 is the pause and repair method. When you feel the urge to yell, pause, take a breath, and later repair by acknowledging your reaction. I yelled earlier, and I wish I had taken a breath first. Okay. So again, it's all about the repair, y'all. And I think this really, their kids are under so much pressure. They expect them to like be able to write their name and know all this stuff before they even get into kindergarten. And then in elementary school, they give them their laptop or their iPad, and then they've got homework all the time. And then it's like getting ready from college from seventh grade on, right? It's insane the pressure we put our kids under, right? And so teaching them to take the moment to pause, the all important breath, and then make a repair if necessary. These are beautiful life skills that will serve them so hard, and it'll make your relationship better. So, who doesn't want that? The next one, number 4, is body-based regulation. So this is a great one for kids, and kids are already actually really good at this. I think this is another way that tech has kind of gotten in the way, but kids love to move. In fact, that can be one of the really annoying parts of kids is, especially if you've got a toddler or just a very hyperactive kid, you might be chasing them all the time. They might be on the go nonstop. And so a great way to do body-based regulation is to use movement, deep breathing, grounding techniques to regulate your emotions before reacting. And I recommend doing this on the daily, not just before a repair or when you get stressed, but like preemptively so that you can be regulated more of the time. So this is things like taking walks, it's like exercising. In DBT, they use the tip skill, which is temperature, like a hot shower, cold shower, intense exercise, progressive muscle relaxation, and paced breathing. So those are some other options. You can just Google tip skill if you want to know more on that one. And then tip number 5 is playful redirection. Okay, so those of you who have toddlers already know this one because this is just like an act of survival. But when they are really fixated on something, you dangle something sparkly over here, right? And it's sort of like, do you want to wear the red shirt or the yellow shirt? So especially the younger the kids are, you want to give them the illusion of choice and a certain sense of freedom because the little ones don't have much freedom. And so I love sense of humor. And it's so cool to me that now that I have a 12-year-old that she can totally playfully redirect backwards back at me. And I just love that humor. It's such a great source of resiliency. It can really help messy or painful moments and it can diffuse tension faster than stern words. So I love the moment when my husband and daughter are getting into it. I'm holding my breath, like, this is going to be bad. And then he like cracks a joke, and then they're both laughing, and I can just go like, ah. Talk about the mom waiting to exhale moment is like, yes. Now it can be hard enough to regulate ourselves, and then we're trying to teach regulation to our kids, and then we gotta see how we can regulate our husbands. I mean, it's a tall order, but what can I say about like have them watch this video, like my video editor does to her husband? Sit down and watch this video. Even though this is a channel for women, we'll help you. We'll pitch it. We'll help you and your husband out. The next one is silent support. Number 6. Sometimes kids need presence more than words. And I love this when my daughter is being annoying to me. I'll go, do you want attention? And she'll go, and I'm like, okay, let's have some positive attention, not negative attention. So sometimes kids need our presence more than our words. And sometimes they just want to like a hug. I think the adage that when someone is being unlovable is when they need love the most is one that I live by. And so sometimes we just need to connect. Back to the connect and redirect one. That one is golden and can be one that you can insert in between all of these. But basically, it's important to be present with them. Often there's so many different distractions and so many things trying to go get our attention that sometimes we can, especially as they get older and more independent, sometimes we're only focusing on them if there's an issue. And so we really want to do that shared space, silent connection, putting in some of that positive intention and just being mindful and present with our kids. So I know staying regulated around your kids is not the easiest thing to do, but wouldn't it be an amazing society if we were all more regulated? Maybe we wouldn't have war or crime or a lot of this toxic stuff happening. If abuse, violence, maybe none of that would be there if we could just learn these strategies, right? So it starts with you staying regulated within yourself and then giving yourself grace and forgiveness if you need to do a repair. And then it's like, can I regulate my family? And then can I be a regulating influence on the world? And so at a time where there's so much polarization, so much stress, and so many people just like feeling like the world's going to hell in a handbasket, can you be a space of peace, calm, and acceptance? And the real kicker with radical acceptance is it's not just accepting the good shit, it's accepting the bad shit too. And being able to kind of hold both, because our world is made out of both. That's the dialectic approach, is that our world is terrible and it's beautiful. And our kids are annoying and they're amazing. And our partners are wonderful and they're trifling, right? And so it's the duality, y'all. So if you found this video helpful, share below your regulation strategies and come check out my ebook. I have an ebook that's all about your pleasure profile. So if you're like, I guess I need to regulate, but I don't know how, download the ebook. There's tons of regulation ideas in there. And let me know if you have any other ideas for parenting videos. I really want to solve some problems for anxious moms because we've got enough on our plate. So if you have specific things you would love me to do a session on, hit it down below. Thanks for watching. You can subscribe, Dr. Megan Monday.